The third on the list is Aritha. Aritha Wickramasinghe is the Equality Director at iPro Bono and General Counsel at TWC Investment Bank, with a background as an investment banking lawyer for Chance and K&L Gates in London. He has held roles including head of legal at Sri Lanka's Ministry of Finance and advisor to the government of financial, economic, and educational reforms. Appointed as a president advisor in 2023, Aritha supports Sri Lanka's IMF-backed economic and social reform agenda and advises the Ministry of Water and Estate Infrastructure Development, known for his advocacy for women, children, and LGBTQI rights. He was recognized as the #1 future business leader by the Financial Times in 2015 as a young role model by Sri Lankan Unites in 2020. So true. Couldn't agree more, actually. Okay, so, the next question is for Arit. With a huge body of work, especially in terms of, decrim work, which is still ongoing, how can legal and policy reforms in Sri Lanka better address the intersectional challenge faced by LGBT individuals, particularly with respect to access to reproductive and sexual in this country?
Thank you, Sylvester. I mean, as you pointed out in your question, decrim is still not finished in Sri Lanka, right? So unlike our neighbor here, India, we haven't even come to the topic of discussing about discrimination in accessing healthcare and other services, because we're still right at the bottom of criminalization, right? How we're talking about how do we give people perceived by the law as criminals and equitable access to healthcare services and other public services as any citizen. But we've managed, despite the challenges of the law, we have managed to push through certain policy initiatives and push for different interpretations of the law. So I've been very lucky with the legal sector here, where we have put out challenges in court where, LGBT plus persons, especially, a lesbian man or a gay man, being prosecuted not because they have been caught having some kind of sexual relationship, but just because they have declared their sexual orientation, and where lesbian women, gay men, and trans people have been subjected to forced anal and vaginal examinations to find evidence that they were homosexual, right? And these examinations are being conducted by health professionals. So they are part of this, they're part of this, the community which is actually perpetuating this violence and discrimination against LGBT people is also the health sector. And that's a problem. I mean, there were some cases which we went through where a lesbian woman was being subjected to a vaginal examination to find evidence that she was homosexual in order to be presented as evidence to prosecute her. And the doctor's report was actually saying how he could only insert one finger into her vagina and not two, and that the vagina was tight, presenting that she was probably a virgin and therefore she must be a lesbian. Right? So in a way, like, being a virgin is also now a criminal offense, as is being a lesbian as well, right? I mean, these are horrific crimes committed by the health sector against LGBT people. So, I mean, one thing we did was we exposed what was happening. And through exposure of what was happening and creating a public outcry about it, we first started with a directive from the Justice Ministry that these examinations need to stop. And then we got a circular issued from the police, which also said that the police cannot participate in these kinds of examinations. And the Justice Ministry issued this circular because these judicial medical officers, even though they're part of the health sector, they are assigned to the Justice Ministry. Then also in the Health Ministry guidelines, there are, within that policy, there is that persons cannot be discriminated based on their SOGI characteristics. We were also able to pass very recently a Women's Empowerment Act, which recognizes expressly the right to equality for women, but also includes in it that women cannot be discriminated based on SOGI. So there is, at least for women now, there is a certain right of protection through policy and legislation. So those are some of the victories we've had in order to create a safer space legally for the LGBT plus community, but that doesn't mean that in practice that it has necessarily become safer. But at least now at least for the community, there is some kind of assurance that should they be denied their access to health or an equitable treatment when they're accessing health, there's some kind of law and policy document which backs him up. So they're a bit better protected, but that does not necessarily mean that they're better served.
Thank you. Navigating one opposition to the another, and this is a question for you. How have anti-gendered movements in Sri Lanka and South Asia impacted your advocacy work for LGBTQI rights and access to?
That's a very, I think, relevant question, because this anti-gender movement it's not a South Asian thing. The anti-gender movement is coming from the West. It is a very much evangelical, Christian, white, Western narrative that is now being imposed on the rest of the world, particularly South Asia and Asian cultures and religions. It is causing a lot of harm already. And the harm is coming through the avenues of either evangelicalism, through the missionaries, through social media, a lot on Twitter. We're seeing a lot of this anti-gender narrative. This thing that, the concept of gender is a new invention, which it isn't, right? Gender is not a new thing. If trans persons did not appear overnight in New York City, right? They were not discovered by Washington, D.C. Trans persons and LGBT people have existed throughout history, throughout all civilizations. When you read the Dhammapada to the Hindu philosophies, trans persons are presented constantly. LGBT persons are constantly presented. Most Hindu gods have different gendered versions of themselves, right? So this is not